Please, divorce me and leave. For some reason, my husband is begging me for a divorce. I'm beyond angry and dismayed at how pathetic he looks. However, this situation is convenient for me as well. Fine. Here's the divorce papers. Afterward, a hell my husband never expected awaited him. My name is Kelly. I'm a career-driven woman. After graduating from graduate school, I worked at a foreign company. Trying not to fall behind male colleagues around me, I kept running, and I suddenly found myself being 33 years old. My friends who've known me from a long time ago keep telling me, just get married already. But I never had a positive image of marriage, so I could only brush off their advice. I had been avoiding them because they always brought up the topic, but one day I found out they had signed me up for a matchmaking party without my knowledge. The place where we gathered was the venue for the matchmaking party, so I couldn't escape from it. They were so nosy that they told me, just tie it. I didn't want to, but before I knew it, I was checking in at the reception. Once it started, the atmosphere started to get gruff, just as I thought it would. Women were concerned about men's income, while men were concerned about women's dating histories. That's why I don't like places like this. I couldn't help but sigh. I'm exhausted. I'm not really cut out for this kind of party either. The one who approached me while I was standing in a corner of the venue was Marshall, who would later become my husband. Most participants were dressed sharply in suits, but Marshall just had a jacket on. Perhaps he was being perceived as not good enough by other women. I still remember that he had been wandering around aimlessly, while he looked like he didn't know what to do. I was going to have a small talk and leave him after that, but for some reason, Marshall tried to talk to me more and get close to me. Initially, I thought, what a hassle, but since he was such a good talker, I was talking all about myself before I knew it. Whoa! Kelly, you're amazing! You must have worked very hard to become a general manager at that young age in that company. Hearing the phrase worked very hard, I felt my throat tightening. Yes, I have been putting in effort consistently. I didn't want to lose to anyone, and I've lived my whole life thinking about work, even on my days off. However, other people wouldn't understand this kind of effort since they can't see it. You're lucky, Kelly. Or you've always been smart, is what I often hear. There are people who are so-called genius who can do everything perfectly from the start, but that's not me. I'm not a genius, and I'm not skilled enough to smoothly handle everything on the first try. I worked tirelessly day and night to finally reach this position. I talked with Marshall, who told me that I worked very hard until the end of the party. For me, with very little experience in romance, Marshall's unconditional praise was comforting. We exchanged contact information, and after having several meals together, Marshall asked me out, and I agreed to it. A year later, he worried about my age and gave me an engagement ring. I'm 5 years younger than you, Kelly, but I'll do my best to support you. With this, I had my first romantic relationship since high school, and I submitted a marriage registration with a man who was younger than me. We had lived separately until then, but after we got married, we moved into a condo that his parents prepared for us, together. My father-in-law purchased the condo with the money he made by winning a horse race 20 years ago. From the beginning, he wanted to move to the outskirts upon retirement. When we got married, they let us live in the condo, and they moved to a small single-story house. This marked the beginning of our sweet married life, but moments of unequivocal happiness were short-lived. In the beginning, we had the rule that the one who returned home from work first would prepare dinner. Of course, we made the rule to share household chores. Both Marshall and I cooked for each other, and we were happy to see each other's happy smile. However, after 6 months, Marshall started coming home late. He explained that he came home late because it was the busy season at work, but I couldn't believe that a busy season could last for half a year. Eventually, even on weekends, he'd say, "I have a business trip, so I won't be here on the weekend." And he'd leave. And he never ate the food I made anymore. Could there really be that many consecutive weeks of overnight business trips? Even if that were the case, isn't his salary too low, then? Even I, who have little experience in love, began to realize that this behavior of his was not normal no matter how I thought about it. "Hey, Marshall, is there someone else you like besides me?" I'm not good at beating around the bush, so I confronted Marshall with what I was thinking. Naturally, he wore a displeased expression, and replied, "Of course not." However, his visibly unsettled demeanor was anything but ordinary. From that day on, conversations between us as a couple practically disappeared, and a business talk-like conversation remained as our only communication. At the same time, I started investigating Marshall's behavior on my own. After about 3 months, I gathered evidence of Marshall's affair. He told me that he was working overtime, but he was having an affair in reality, as I had suspected. He would visit his affair partner's apartment almost every day, have meals there, and then return home. This explains why he never ate the food I cooked. After I found this out, I realized that I couldn't stay married to Marshall. Even though it had been just a little over a year, I made up my mind to ask Marshall for a divorce. Just as I was about to confront him with the evidence when the time was right, suddenly I got the news that my father-in-law had passed away. He collapsed on his way home after enjoying fishing, which was his hobby, and passed away. The sudden news of his passing left both me and Marshall speechless. Though I still had the feeling that I wanted to divorce Marshall right away, I thought if we were to divorce now, I wouldn't be able to attend my father-in-law's funeral, who has taken care of me, so I decided not to ask for a divorce yet, and I attended my father-in-law's funeral with Marshall. The sight of my weeping mother-in-law is still etched in my mind, and I can't forget it. If it was shocking to us, it was the same for my mother-in-law. No, it's more than that. After the funeral, I left Marshall, who wanted to stay with my mother-in-law for a week, and I returned to the condo by myself and continued my life as before. My in-laws were good people, and the fact that Marshall cheated on me will be hard for my mother-in-law, who's just lost her husband, but I'll have to tell her at some point. I started sorting out my belongings little by little, so that I could leave right away when Marshall returned home. After a week, Marshall returned home. I thought he'd probably look downcast, but his complexion was much better than before. I wondered if something good happened or if he was happy because my mother-in-law had gotten better. We had dinner together for the first time in months, and he was smiling the whole time. Just as I was about to give evidence, Marshall said, "I need to talk to you," and looked at me with a serious expression different from before. "What is it?" I asked, and Marshall began to beg suddenly. "Please! Divorce me and leave!" It was so sudden that it took me by surprise. "Why?" I asked, and he lifted his face. His mouth curved into a wicked smile. "It's because I've inherited this condo. I don't need you anymore." I was surprised to hear the word I never thought I would hear, and the words, "What?" came out of my mouth. Without caring about that, Marshall continued talking. "The reason why I married you in the first place was your money. I thought you'd disagree with it if I suggested that we keep our finances separate, but you readily agreed to that." Indeed, he did suggest keeping our finances separate. But I hadn't thought there was any ulterior motive. He also complained about things like the food you make is bad, and our physical compatibility is bad. "I thought I'll just endure it, and I can also find satisfaction with someone else, and I would make you earn money." He was speaking while nodding, seemingly satisfied for some reason. While it might make sense from Marshall's perspective, from my standpoint, it was completely off track. "But now that my father passed away, I've inherited this condo sooner than expected, so I don't need you anymore." I see, so that's how it is. I actually wanted to bring up the divorce first, but well, the outcome is the same. I swiftly presented the already filled divorce papers. "Sure, here are the divorce papers. I've already filled out my part, so you can fill your part now. I'll submit it on my end." Though Marshall was surprised initially, he signed them with a joyful look because I agreed to the divorce easily. "All right, then I'm leaving now. Oh, and the lawyer will be contacting you about alimony, so please take care of it, okay?" Where did his smile from a moment ago go? Marshall said, "Huh," in a pathetic voice. Leaving Marshall, who was saying "hold on" behind, I quickly left the condo. I had already moved what I needed to the new place, and once I submit the divorce papers, it will be over. I've already consulted a lawyer, and though I feel sorry for my mother-in-law, my married life ends here. With the investigation report obtained from the private detective, I demanded alimony, and received the full amount in a lump sum. Since I hadn't been in direct contact, I heard everything from the lawyer, but, upon hearing the alimony amount, Marshall apparently said, "In the worst-case scenario, I can just sell that condo." Unfortunately, that apartment no longer holds any financial value. It's been over 20 years since it was built, and soon, a larger and more luxurious condo will be built nearby. The view from the condo will be blocked by the new condo, and also there will be significantly less daylight hours than before, even with legal considerations. Due to its age, various repairs are necessary, making the maintenance costs considerable. Even if it's called a high-rise condo, who would want to buy such a place? Sure enough, it seems Marshall is struggling financially. What he inherited from his father isn't just that condo, but also the house where his mother lives. It seems they still have a mortgage to pay, and they're struggling with that. Since Marshall covered the compensation that his affair partner was supposed to give me as well, he probably has very little savings left. It's a pitiful situation. No, I don't need to worry about that. His affair partner was working at the same company as my ex-husband, and they were caught slacking off at work to flirt, and they were both fired. That's not my fault. All of this is the result of Marshall's own choices. Because he had a stupid idea that he could use me as a money source, he ended up in this shameful situation. If he had cared about me a bit more, if he hadn't just criticized me, and tried to change his mindset, perhaps things wouldn't have turned out like this. There are times when I think about such things, but it's all in the past now. I want them to reflect deeply on what they did wrong, in the pit they dug for themselves. As for me, I'm still single, several years after my divorce. Friends who used to tell me to get married, don't say anything now. Because I've already experienced a failed marriage, I don't think I'll ever marry again. Sure, I might not be able to get pregnant when I get older, but I can marry someone at any time. When I find someone I feel I can entrust my life to, I'll consider it at that time. For a while, I'll focus on myself and my work. I'm going to take it easy, and maybe I'll find that someone someday.